Hey everybody. So to pick up where we were at on social class and inequality, we're just talking about the various negative health outcomes that come with living in poverty. And I think an example that is really important is to see how many Americans, both children and adults, are food insecure. So there's approximately 29.1 million adults and 13.1 million children are food insecure. This means that do not know where their next source of food will be, do not have easy access to food, do not have, a lot of these individuals live in food deserts where they do not have easy accessibility to affordable food. And this is one, of course, if being food insecure, you can imagine how detrimental that's going to be to just your overall health, but your overall well-being. Imagine how hard it is to succeed in school if you're food insecure. Imagine how hard it is to play sports if you're food insecure. To try to just operate, in your daily life. Being food insecure is an extreme burden that those in poverty suffer from, that those that are not impoverished don't have to worry about and take for granted. And there's a lot of different ways to think through this, but probably a good example right now is one of the concerns hopefully you read about during the COVID school shutdowns. There was concerns from some school administrators to close schools because schools for many students, many young people, are the only source of a healthy meal or even a meal for students that live in poverty. And so shutting down schools serve a lot of different functions in our society. And one thing they do is provide food, affordable food, or free or reduced food for those in need. And so that's been a really big concern because it's already hard for most children that live in poverty to make it through the summer. And being food insecure. And when you add in the fact that schools were already shut down months before that, that's really caused a lot of stress and concerns. We see a lot of food banks doing really important work right now, getting in a neighborhood. Some schools have reopened, not for schools, but just to serve meals for students in need. And that's just another consequence of living in poverty, how the array of detrimental health outcomes there are going to be. Now, with education, we've already talked about it a lot. But education and education success is largely dictated by your social class, because your social class dictates so much of your life. It dictates the type of school you go to. It dictates the resources you have at home to help you succeed on your homework and help you apply to college, maybe even see college as attainable. And a lot of you in our blog activity and or actually for the exam, or for quiz one, sorry, you had to answer a question like what kind of external forces influenced your ability to attend college and your decision to attend CNU. And you all did a very good job of seeing how array of things in your personal space impacted you. But I want you all to keep pushing that and see how larger systems and structures impacted those personal experiences around you. For example, many of you cited that you went to a high achieving high school where most graduates go to college. If you went to a high school if you went to high school where most graduates were going to college, you probably had access to an array of assistance and opportunities and resources that helped you, one, exceed, then two, prepare for college, and three, actually apply and access college that many students, especially those living in poverty, do not have access to. Just the price tag alone of college makes it seem unattainable for millions of Americans. And on top of that, just to not only the resources that are present in some schools and not others, the education experience looks very, very different. For example, whether it be less experienced teachers, whether it be because you live in poverty and you've got these array of other life demands that are straining you, like we just talked about food insecurity. Imagine trying, a lot of you cited you had pressures from your parents to attend college. Well, think about how juxtapose that with the pressures of you don't know where your next meal is going to come from, and what the kind of stress that's going to cause, and kind of the prioritization of needs that's going to happen. And with you can see this really play out in the data in terms of where children, whether they exist, what social class they exist in, the likelihood that they get to college, but also the better schools. And as more and more of our jobs, we become more of a creative economy, and more jobs demand a college degree, we're going to continue to see these wealth and income gaps begin to grow. And so just think through that as you're thinking through the larger, I want you all, like, of course, you're doing a very good job of thinking through how external social forces are impacting you, but also think how your experience looks far different than your experience of other Americans, and that's largely because of larger systems and structures. For example, why does our system exist in a way that where you grow up, in the neighborhood you grow up in, determines the public education that you get? It's like we don't really, we tend to think education is all the same, but it's not at all. And that's where I want you all to begin challenging yourself and asking yourself why that is, and like historically how we've gotten to this point, and then what kind of structures are continuing to perpetuate these inequality across social class in the education sector, and then how can we dismantle those structures? Okay, then wrap up. The big question is, poverty is extremely detrimental for health, education, for just all these later life outcomes. So why does it persist? Why do we still have poverty? We're the wealthiest nation in the world. Why do we still have poverty? There's a couple different arguments. One is we have this ideology, competitive individualism, and what that means is, we constantly are taught that no one deserves a free ride, and that you need to work hard in order to experience success. The problem is when you hold this ideology and you do not recognize systems and structures that give access to opportunities to some and not others, you then make the incorrect assumption that those that are successful were simply more talented and harder working, and those that are not successful were lazy or not talented. When in reality, what that does is that allows you to not have to interrogate these flawed systems and structures that perpetuate inequality and make the position you're born in the major predictor of later life success. And so it allows us, when we hold this ideology and don't and are blind to broken systems and structures, or flawed systems and structures, it allows us to justify poverty. Say, oh, poverty exists because of personal failings or lack of work ethic, when in reality, like I said, there are an array of flawed elements in our systems, and that's one way the poverty persists, because it doesn't force us to interrogate how can we have homelessness, for example, in the richest country in the world? How can we have poverty in the richest nation in the world? And using this ideology, it's allowed for us for a long, long time to not interrogate this further and just treat it as good people, hard workers versus bad people, not hard workers. In reality, that's just not the case. In fact, some of them, hardest workers in this country are our working class people that are living paycheck to paycheck, some just above that poverty line, but living in poverty, just not qualifying to the antiquated formula. And I hope, after doing this section, you think through that a little more and you begin to question that ideology and its presence in our culture. Also, I have you all reading Herbert Gann's work this week. And when Gans is going to make the argument, Gans argues that poverty will always exist because it provides benefits to those who are not in poverty. In fact, he calls this the functions of poverty. This idea that, and he gives an array of examples that you really think through that. But one example I think is important is Gans talks about how those that live in poverty often work jobs that those who are upper middle class or wealthy or middle class do not want to work. However, those jobs are essential to the functioning of our economy. And so having poverty benefits those that are not in poverty because they don't have to work those jobs, but those jobs still get taken care of. For example, you have to have, in our system today, somebody has to clean up our trash, right? And being a working in trash collection and waste management, it is not glamorous, does not pay well, but it's hard labor and hard work, and it's absolutely essential work. However, if nobody lived in poverty, Gans argues, who would work those jobs? Because we have to have them. And so Gans argues those that are in power, they don't want poverty to go away, because if poverty goes away, then you lose the benefits of not being in poverty. Gans also talks about there's a power dynamics. For example, if poverty exists, that always assures, if you're not in poverty, that you have power and supremacy over somebody. And that is because of these myriad of factors you'll come across in the reading. You'll realize that what Gann's argument is, that poverty exists because we don't have the social and political will to get rid of it, because it provides benefits to those who do not live in poverty. So for the blog this week, I think this is a really interesting blog, and our blog activity. And essentially what you're going to do is you're going to score your living room, and you're going to use this living room scale that was developed, and try to determine. It's trying to determine, based on what is in your living room, what is your social class. And so that's telling us a couple things. It tells us about how class shapes our preferences and things like status markers and things of that nature. But I want you to ask yourself, whatever score you come up with and how that score ranks you according to these scoring brackets, whatever class that puts you in, do you think your family falls in that class? For example, if you ended up with 140, you would be in the middle class according to the scale. Do you consider your family middle class? And then ask yourself, as you go through that, ask yourself why they were scoring things in the way they do. Because if something is adding points, it is meant to show that it is more likely to be present in higher social classes, and minus points is telling you lower. Now, as you work through that, just like I said, ask yourself, is this antiquated? Does this thing need to be updated? Because the last one, the one that we're using, is a couple decades old. Because the original was developed in 1930, and this one came about in 1983. And just ask yourself, what is Fuzzle trying to say in terms of how our living room is reflecting our social class? Okay, I hope you all enjoy that. I look forward to reading your activity, and have a wonderful day.